irrepressible protagonist, pounding poos on a pickle pulpit.
Hello and welcome to the Quackcast. This is Quackcast 315. I'm Ozone Ocean, and with me is the very creepy Pitface, Pastaface, and the even creepier Baines.
Hello.
Oh, that was awesome. That was fantastic. So we're going to
Was it better than mine?
No.
No, of course not. We're going to talk about creepy pastas. We're just going to read it just for fun because Pitface and Baines love creepy things. They're very creepy
Monsters.
So we're going to do that. But before we get into that, we have, of course, the featured comic. And the featured comic this week was Mythologia, I think. I think that's all the words in the title of the comic. Yes.
Did I get all of the letters?
Mythologia. Now, this is a comic that Tanserine recommends very highly because it's all about Greek myth and retelling the stories of the Greek myths, you know, like the births of sort of heroic kind of characters and the influence that the gods had on, giving birth to these characters like Zeus and his golden shower sort of thing, and it's all there. It's all there, and it's rendered deliciously in beautiful artwork. So I advise anyone who's interested in the Greek myths to go and have a look and see how it's been recreated here by whoever did it. The same person, same team, or the same writer who did the assassination of Franz Ferdinand. And I will read all that out. So here we are.
Yes.
Mythologia.
Sweet.
Hello, I'm Ozone Ocean, and my feature of the week was Mythologia. If you ever wanted to know some more about the famous Greek heroes and gods, but were fed up with the cartoony versions touted by Disney, and the insane versions in Hollywood movies and video games, you know, crap like Xena and Gods of War and whatever else, Brad Pitt movies, whatever. If you want actual retellings of Greek myths that aren't rubbish, then this is the thing for you. This is a faithful retelling of the stories coupled with amazing artwork that shows Greek people actually looking like real Greek people. The artwork is beautiful, all in soft colour. There's great attention to detail on the architecture. It's actual Greek architecture as well that's depicted, not fantasy crap. The armour, it's Greek armour. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. You can't improve on that. The clothing, real Greek outfits, and even the hairstyles. And it looks fantastic for all that, as it should. The writing is nicely adapted from original sources, but perhaps it is rather terse at times and abbreviated. Although there is a lot of ground to cover in these stories, so the brevity is understandable. Yeah, because if you want to do all of the Greek myths in all of the things, they depict things place over a very long period of time, and the Greek myths themselves are rather terse in that thing. You know, they say, oh, this person married that person, and then this person gave birth. You know, whereas you're not sort of filling in the whole 9 months of gestating some child. You know, of the gods. There's things happen very quickly in the Greek myths, and this story is sort of even quicker in that, as the author races to get to the meaty bits. You know, you've got to have the gods being born, or the demigods in this case, before you can really start to have the action happening and them coming to their destinies as leaders of countries and fighters of monsters and gods and whatever. So, yeah, there's that. Warning, there is some tasteful nudity and a tasteful sex scene. Well, you know, you've got to have that with Zeus and his randiness. The art is by Anna Karitanova, and the writing is by Dimitris Manos. This is the same pen that brought us the beautiful The Assassination of Franz Ferdinand, which was also featured a while ago. So I hope you enjoy Mythologia by Centrifugal. That's the pen name of Dimitris, I believe. Rated M for Mythologia. And that was Ozone Ocean reading out Mythologia. So, next up...
Sure was. I'll say.
You do indeed, in your creepy way. Next up, we have the featured featured music, sorry. Gumwalls has given us the theme to a comic called My Pet Succubus. Oh, nothing creepier than succubuses.
Intriguing title.
My Pet Succubus. Now, this is a comic I featured last year. Beautiful cartoony artwork, very manga style, but cute and sexy. So I would describe this as it's party time down here. Bouncing, rolling piano, tapping drums, ebullient synth strings exemplify the happy-go-lucky personality of the irrepressible protagonist of this comic. So take it away, Mr. Gun Wallace. And that was the featured music by Mr. Gun Wallace. Thank you so much for that, Mr. Gun Wallace. It was very sexy and fun and cool and joyous. So, we're going to be talking about...
Sexy.
We're going to be talking about sexy creepy pasta. No, just creepy pasta.
Oh, I'm leaving.
Well, yours can be sexy. I'm sure they will be. Well... Creepypasta. What is creepypasta? Apart from the stuff Baines ate and made him sick from both ends. What?
Yes.
What?
I can. Ever since you said that, I can't stop thinking of it. Every time you say creepypasta now, I think of
That's the real horror story.
how ill I am.
It's worse when you got both guns firing at once.
Oh,
There's no way
man.
to handle that, but just to kind of batten down and accept what's coming.
It's
Which is
true.
how most creepypastas turn out, evidently.
That's true. Yeah. I had that happen once. The both ends thing. This is not a good story for people. I was like very, very hungover, and I'm like, so I get up and I'm like, oh my god, and I go into the washroom, sitting
it's
down,
the worst.
and like, oh, okay, here's.
You just pray for death.
Yes, you just praying for death, exactly. And I'm just like, oh boy. So I'm there, and it's it's happening, and then I'm like, oh my god, I'm gonna vomit at the same time, but I can't get up. Luckily, my bathroom was like really small. It was like right off the kitchen, and I had a garbage can right outside the door. So I literally like opened the door, grabbed my garbage can, and pulled it in. Like everything's like horrible.
Fired a full broadside.
Oh, it was unbelievable. Sorry, everybody, about that. It's gross.
No, that's fine. That's a good start, man. That's a good start to our rampage.
Creepypasta.
Yeah,
I
totally
had some
rampage.
creepypasta once. It was on I was on a ship, sail training ship, and they gave us tinned spaghetti, which is the worst thing because in the tin it actually looks and smells like vomit already.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
you know what's going to happen the next day. Your second day
Right.
on the ship, you're feeling seasick. There's a storm. Ship is just going whoa side to side, and yeah.
Oh,
it's,
man.
it's out the other end, you know.
Yeah.
Over the side. Tin
Let the
spaghetti.
sea deal with it.
Exactly.
Tin spaghetti, man. That sounds so bad.
Feed
Sounds
the
like it'd
fish.
be some Primus song. Tin spaghetti, get your tin spaghetti.
That is a good title for us.
Yeah.
So what are the titles of your creepypastas that you guys
So
have
for
found?
our first round here, I got Nice Neighbors. It doesn't have the author on it. It's in that website, creepypasta.com that you sent us, Oz.
Oh, it doesn't have a credit down the bottom of the story?
Oh, it's at the bottom? Let me see.
The bottom.
At the bottom.
Anika Vigil.
Oh, there you are.
That's what that really. It's a very nice name.
Nice.
And Anika
For
Vigil.
a devious mind such as this.
It's Phantom of the Opera all of a sudden.
What about you, Bones?
I have one called Uncle Buck.
Oh, that was a good film with Macaulay Culkin.
Yeah, it's a John Candy movie. Yeah.
There's got to be some incest in that.
What's that?
So there's got to be incest in that.
The story is by Evil Meow.
God. Well, my story is called The House in the Shade, and it's by Frank Waggers, or Wagers. But I think Waggers sounds more funny.
This is the internet. You can call him whatever you want.
Yeah.
Frank Arsehole. No, not that quick. No. Frank Waggers. So who wants to go first with our creepy... Why are creepypastas called creepypastas, for a start? I mean, let's explain to people, what is a creepypasta? For all those 2 people on the internet who don't know what a creepypasta is.
The noobs! The noobs!
Noobs. Exactly. What is... Well,
They're horror stories, and aren't they, they're born on the internet, and some of them purported to be true.
yeah. Well, the name comes from copy and paste. Creepy and copy and paste. Creepypasta, copy and pasta. Or tin spaghetti. You
Such
take
a
your pick.
dumb name that I love it, man.
Creepypasta.
Only the internet.
And yeah, they apparently gained a lot of fame back in 2010 when some girls stabbed a friend and claimed it was the Slender Man, which is one of the creepypasta.
Right, that's the big one, the Slender Man. This other dimensional kind of being who shows up all over.
Exactly.
Really tall dude.
Yeah, tall and
He's
thin
like,
and shiny.
it's interesting because it's like, this is, how every place kind of has their local urban legends. Well, these are like the urban legends of the internet.
Right. Exactly. Well put. Yeah.
Thank you. I had a stroke of genius, so I decided to butt in before Oz said it because I know he was going to in like the next 2 sentences. I'm like, I got to do it first.
The first one I ever read was Candle Cove. Does everybody know that?
Oh,
Yes.
I only ever saw the video. That they made a video of that. It's supposed
Okay,
to be the lost episode. Have you seen the video?
I think is it just someone reading the forum?
No, it's somebody actually made. I don't know if the story came from this lost episode, which is it's a hoax as far as I know. But somebody actually made the episode of this TV show, because that's what the creepypasta was based around, right? Like the kid watched this really disturbing episode of this kid show when he was younger. But
this old TV
never
show
saw
with
it again.
pirates and puppets and like sort of foam, and then there was weird memories about the show the story is written like a forum post. It's like this was pulled off of, TV Watchers Forum or something. So it's all these people slowly remembering this show and the sort of the odd things that happened on it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So if you haven't seen it, Bades, I'll send it to you when we're done. But yeah, there's the actual TV show episode that he had watched. is supposed to be posted.
I might have seen that. Yeah, might have.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah.
But very creepy story anyway, and very cleverly written as forum posts, and by a pretty famous webcomic dude, I think, wrote it.
Oh, really?
Connection. I want to say Chris Straub. Anyway. Yeah.
Oh, Chris Straub. Yeah, of
Okay.
course. Very famous for his various comics. I think the whole Candle Cove thing is probably based on things like H&R Puffin stuff and Banana.
Yeah, it's like one of those shows from back then, but it's like all of a sudden it just turns into something terrible, just like this random screaming and stuff like that. It's almost funny when you watch it because like all this screaming going on and like there's pictures of like crying children and then like one of the screams in the background you could hear just sounds ridiculous because he's just going blah, blah. But it's so good though. And then there's this weird little still shot that lasts for like a split second at the end, and that used to creep me out for some reason. But go watch it. I mean, it's kind of neat.
It is neat. I found it. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, it's clever. It takes the whole myth into another dimension. Like it makes it seem even more real, which is the whole purpose of the creepypastas, because they're meant to seem as if they could be real. And as Baines was telling me that people apparently do post true stories as well and write them out in a creepy way. So
that's what I'm reading. I'm going to be reading that, like people's actual stories, kind of what I prefer. That kind of stuff, I find it scarier. And as Pitt was saying, the sort of scary true camping experiences, people encounter something odd out in the woods and blah blah blah.
Oh god. So who would like to go first with their creepy pasta?
Creepy pastas.
Yeah, I'll go.
Yeah?
Thanks.
This story is, after all that intro about creepypastas, this is not technically a creepypasta. It purports to be a true story. But, potato. Pasta, pasta. Anyway. Here we go. It's called Uncle Buck. Okay. My dad grew up in a rural farm community and had to walk half a mile to and from the bus stop. He was the youngest of 5, and he was in his last year of elementary school while his siblings were either in middle or high school. This meant he went to the same bus stop as his siblings, but they were picked up and dropped off at the bus at different times. My grandma was a single mom who worked as a nurse and couldn't pick him up, but my aunts and uncles usually took good care of him. There was rarely trouble in my dad's county, besides small things like bar fights, poaching, or teens taking tractors out for joyrides. One day when he was walking home on the stretch of country road on my family's property, he saw a van whiz by him. While it was private farmland and usually the gate was locked, my grandma's family usually let locals drive through as a shortcut, so my dad wasn't too alarmed. However, my dad did become a bit alarmed when he realized the van was parked a ways up the road from his uncle's house. As soon as he passed his uncle's house, the van sped up. It didn't stop until it reached the road at the bottom of the hill that led to my dad's great-uncle's house. My dad looked inside the van as he passed it and saw a gruff, bug-eyed, older man. My dad said the look in his eyes was unsettling, like an excited shark setting its sight on its prey. My dad innocently asked, "What are you doing on Papa's farm?" The old man got out of the car and gave my dad some spiel about how his parents had been in a car crash and my dad needed to go with him. My dad's alarms went off for one single reason. His parents were divorced, and his dad lived 2 states away. His parents couldn't stand to be around each other, much less in the same car, unless it was absolutely necessary. Thinking quick, my dad asked, "Did you take my brother Ricky to the hospital already?" The old man told my dad, "Oh yeah, I picked Ricky up from school and took him already." My dad yelled at the man, "I don't have a brother Ricky." He ran towards his house, cutting across the forest to his house. The old man followed behind, yelling at my dad. My dad was about to give out from exhaustion when he saw the driveway to his house. He saw my grandma wasn't even home and got scared. The man would try to come inside the house when he saw Uncle Buck standing on the porch, cleaning his favorite rifle. This struck my dad as odd because Grandma had told my dad Uncle Buck had gone on vacation, and my dad hadn't seen him for months. "Uncle Buck, that old man is trying to get me in his car, saying Mom and Dad are at the hospital." Uncle Buck was a scary-looking guy. He was a World War II vet with Willie Nelson braids and a ZZ Top beard. He was a biker who drank whiskey and smoked cigars and won plenty of bar fights. Definitely the kind of guy you don't mess with. You didn't mess with. He didn't say anything as my dad ran inside the house. He watched from his bedroom window as Uncle Buck put his rifle together really quick and yelled something at the van. The old man narrowed his eyes at my dad and spun around down the driveway. It took my dad a few minutes to calm down before he went back to the porch to talk to Uncle Buck. But when he went there, he didn't see Uncle Buck anywhere around the house. When my dad's siblings and Grandma came home, he told them what happened. According to my dad, Grandma got whiter than a sheet and asked my dad if he was sure it was Uncle Buck. Sure. He was even wearing the new motorcycle jacket Mom got him for his birthday. Grandma didn't say anything for a few hours, or that Mama got him for his birthday. I guess that's a grandmother. My grandma didn't say anything for a few hours. That night after dinner, my grandmother explained to my dad that Uncle Buck had died in a motorcycle crash a few months earlier in Florida, and that they had buried him in those exact clothes. So my dad was just imagining it. My dad explained to her that he was cleaning his rifle, that apparently he kept under lock and key in Grandma's basement. When he died, they couldn't find the keys anywhere, so the case remained locked. The scariest part, when my grandma went to check the case, it was unlocked and unlatched. Gotta thank Uncle Buck for saving my dad, otherwise I wouldn't be here today.
That's a great story. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
And it was really real. It was really real.
The ghost of Uncle Buck. Ooh. That was very
My
cool,
name is
mate.
Buck, and I'm here to...
That was awesome. All right, I should go next then, unless you want to go, Pitt.
It doesn't matter to me.
Okay, all right. I have no idea what this story is. I just like the title. The House in the Shade. That's all you need. A title. A cover, a title.
It does. It's very pleasant.
So, I'm going to read this out. It's a story by, Frank Waggers. I know that's probably pronounced Wagers, but, whatever. The House in the Shade. These events took place when I was 5 years old in the rural South. You see, back then, my family was moving from town to town because of my stepfather's work. Among the memories I have of this time includes some family secrets we still don't really talk about today. What I'm about to relate to you is one such untold secret we would rather forget. The modest white house we had recently moved into was surrounded by 2 large willow trees that blocked out the sun, leaving our backyard shadowed and apart from the rest of the world. My 2 older sisters and I would often swing from their branches and climb the thick trunks, while our mother and stepfather would sit on the porch and contentedly watch us play in the late afternoon. We would ride bikes, swim in the inflatable pool, fly kites, and run on the slip and slide. You name it. We were very active children and never left a beautiful day unfulfilled. Across the street were a few other homes, and the The sweet old couple directly across from us would often sit on their own porch and wave and smile at us as they drank lemonade from a large pitcher and sat in the old wooden rocking chairs. Our mother would often wave cheerfully to them when we were outside. And their smiles and sweetness always made the day more pleasant, until, that is, a few months after moving into the old white home, our mother got the three of us together, telling us there was something we needed to talk about as a family. She told us sternly that we were no longer to wave at the sweet elderly couple across the street. She went so far as to tell us not even to look at them, and if we saw them waving at us, we were to come inside and to tell her. This was an odd request to us. Nothing about the elderly couple seemed threatening or off in any way. Hell, our mother was the one who was always talking about how sweet they were to be so friendly. So this request baffled us and continued to baffle us for the rest of our stay at this particular home. But we minded and no longer responded to the couple across the street. Soon they had been easily forgotten as we got on with our lives and in our other homes in other towns. That is, until I was 16 years old, having a pleasant dinner out with my sisters and mother, a rare occurrence, for sure, during this time of our lives. For whatever reason, over our evening meal, the conversation turned to the quiet old house and the elderly couple across the street. As soon as the subject had been brought up, my mother's joyful face darkened, her eyes fell to her lap, and it took her a moment before she actually addressed us. She told us that she had been afraid to talk about the subject all these years, particularly while we were still living in that home, afraid of needlessly making us afraid of staying in the quiet house in the shade of the willow trees. At that time, our stepfather had been working in the local Pepsi company, and a well-paying job that allowed my mother to stay home with the three of us while making a modest living for our family. Apparently, one of his co-workers has actually lived in that house beside the Willow home for nearly 6 years and had moved out the year before. My stepfather and the man were talking about the neighborhood and that house when, at some point, my stepfather mentioned the sweet elderly couple that liked to sit on the porch in the evening and watch us kids laugh and play. The man looked quizzically puzzled. He said that my stepfather must be joking, just pulling his leg. My stepfather replied, just as perplexed, with a sober face. My co-worker told my stepfather that there was no elderly couple living across the street. Sure, there had once been such occupants in the home, but they had both died horribly nearly 3 years before from carbon monoxide poisoning. The couple's stove had leaked gas for days before they finally succumbed to the poisoning, and it took longer than that for anyone to find the dead couple. The man knew because he was the one who crossed the street to check on them, only to find the ghastly scene. He recommended we leave the house in the shade. So, there we are. Frank Waggers.
Frank Waggers and your ghostly neighbors.
Another ghost story.
You read those really well, man. You could do that.
Yeah.
If you wanted to.
Oh, thank you. I can't really
With
hear
that
what
fake
I say.
accent you use. It gives it more...
real Australian.
Yeah, it gives it a reality.
Well, yeah, there we are. That was a nice short story that I found about ghosts. What about you, Pete? What's your magical ghost story?
Mine is Nice Neighbors.
Oh.
So I think it's probably going to steer kind of in the same direction.
Well, that's a running theme here.
Yeah.
I like it.
Great
Right.
minds.
Great minds. All right. Her family had lived in that house on the street for as long as Ivana could remember. She had her birthday parties in that backyard and swung from the big tree in the front yard until the rope wore down and the metal creaked. Every Christmas morning, her and her brothers gathered on the floor before the tree, and every Easter they sat on the back porch and dyed eggs to fill with confetti and glitter. Their walls were covered in both old and new photos, some black and white, some faded sepia, and others from the weekend previous. It had always seemed to smell of their grandmother's flowery perfume and smoke from their small wood-burning fireplace. Not too big, but big enough, as her father always said. It was home, serving as the backdrop for every fond memory she held dear. Well, them and the less pleasant one. Having lived in that neighborhood for so long, they had come to be close with almost all of their immediate neighbors. To their left lived an elderly couple Ivana knew simply as Mr. and Mrs. Herrera, who always sat in rock chairs in their netted enclosed porch. And to their right lived the Campbell family. The Campbell house was painted a lilac color, and their backyards were separated by nothing more than a chain link fence. It had a bigger front yard, too, or at least it felt that way since they lacked the bushes or trees, which in turn led many afternoons spent playing tag there with the Campbell kids. The youngest of them was a girl, 2 years older than Ivana, named Alyssa. The two were very close and often walked to school with their arms linked as they tried to stomp in every puddle or kick as much snow off the sidewalk as they could. Alyssa was at every one of those birthday parties without fail, and Ivana climbed over the fence to join every one of hers. They agreed that nothing could ever separate them, and someday they might even move away together. The best thing was, in their minds, the fact that their bedroom windows were both on the sides of their respective house, facing each other. The two of them would sit in the windowsills, perched like birds, and spent many hours talking by writing on notebooks and holding them up for each other to see. They would get each other's attention late at night with a few flickers of a flashlight, and reveled in the disobedience and perceived danger of it all. They should they be found awake. Gossip, homework, answers, anything to preoccupy each other until they were too tired to stay awake. Ivana looked forward to it every night, especially on days when chores and schoolwork kept her out of the yard. Snowy and sick days were by far the worst, and she sought comfort in leaning against the glass with her flashlight in hand. Alyssa was her best friend, and she loved her. Alyssa, unfortunately, didn't stick around as long as she had planned. That warm summer morning, when the moving truck pulled up in front of the Lilac House, the two girls were heartbroken. Neither had known that far in advance, and when the news had been broken to them, it was taken with the hopeless sort of sadness that came with the inevitable. It rained that afternoon, and Alyssa stood in her window with her backpack over one shoulder, waving goodbye. She wasn't crying, and Ivana smiled back with as much reassurance as she could muster. After her friend had gotten into the car and drove away, all of her family's belongings in tow, however, all she could do was cry in her pillow so nobody would hear. She was no big girl after all. "No, Mommy, it's okay. We're going to call and write letters. She'll do it," she promised. The house was empty for a long while. Growing weeds still remained vacant and silent. They stayed out of the front yard and only went over to pick the for sale sign back up after it would fall over. Winter blanketed the house in snow and was left untarnished by footsteps until spring. The lawn turned brown under the summer sun without someone to water it in the evenings. School started back up again, and Ivana had only received one letter and 2 phone calls from her old friend. They didn't know what to talk about either time. She wouldn't have noticed the for sale sign go down if it wasn't for her brother, Thomas's suspicious tendencies. Thomas had said multiple times that he had seen people going in and out, but their parents insisted that they had been keeping an eye out and had seen nothing. When he pointed the now empty yard out of what? Okay. When he pointed the now empty yard out to their father, he shrugged and suggested that maybe someone was moving in. They never saw a moving truck or the big spectacle that accompanied new tenants. The red pickup truck was just there one day. At first it appeared that only one person had moved it. A man with a thick white mustache and thinning silver blonde hair would occasionally leave to go to buy groceries, and sometimes he would just pace the porch in the evenings with a beer can in one hand, wearing nothing but a wife beater and a pair of grimy jeans. He introduced himself reluctantly in passing, once as Douglas. Ivana didn't like the way his gaze lingered on her when he noticed her standing there. Sometimes she would go out and swing only to go inside promptly after noticing him in the window or looking out the screen door. He looked like he couldn't figure out what she was, like she was some unidentifiable animal prowling about the property. One late winter night, something else happened that she found unsettlingly odd. She lay in bed half awake when something in the window of Alessa's old room caught her attention. It was a tiny flicker, not like a flashlight, but more the reflection of light of something else. She sat up, convinced it was a trick of memory and light. The flickering was deliberate, a pattern of varying durations, and something was moving ever so slightly between the half-drawn curtains in the darkness of the supposedly vacant room. Sliding out from under the covers, she made her way to window and cupped her hands around her eyes for a cleaner look. The room wasn't vacant at all. A girl a few years younger than her stood almost out of sight with a compact mirror in her hand. She was using the glow of the street lamp and waved excitedly when she was noticed. She moved forward and began to mouth something unintelligible as Ivana reached out for her notebook in response. "Hey there, who are you?" The girl looked confused and didn't appear to understand either what was written or what the question was. She stared blankly at her a moment before she mouthed the simple question. "Name?" Ivana nodded, urging her to answer. She pointed to herself and mouthed Ivana as well as she could before pointing to the girl for her response. "Marissa." After a few tries, Ivana turned back to the notebook and held it up long enough for the girl to decipher. It's nice to meet you, Marissa." Marissa nodded happily and smiled a wide, toothy grin. She was missing a few front teeth, but didn't seem to mind. Soon they would be back, seeing that adult teeth were beginning to peek out of her gums. It was nothing unusual for a child her age. She pointed out and then held up 2 fingers. The message was clear. "You too." Before she could write anything more, Marissa's head turned and she suddenly looked flustered. She turned back only to wave before slipping out of sight. This left Ivana slightly rattled, wondering if this was something normal or not. Some people were just shy, she knew, and she didn't want to make mountains out of molehills. But the encounter left her uncomfortable. It wasn't the last time Marissa appeared in the window. She would stand there waiting for her new friend to notice and come to the window. She only appeared at night at first, which allowed the "I'm tired, gotta sleep" half excuse to be used. Only the sad look on Marissa's face made her insides writhe with guilt. It was difficult to talk, since she never had any paper and wouldn't open the window because there was a house alarm installed, so the conversations were quite brief. The girl's voice was a mystery for the longest time. Soon, she was there during the day, too, which made things less unsettling and more uncomfortable. Okay, the window would slide open at around 9 in the morning, and if she was anywhere in sight, Marissa would call her name. Sometimes she threw little pebbles at the glass until she came to look. She spoke too fast and asked too many questions, which Ivana politely answered until an excuse popped up. It made her feel like a horrible sort of friend. "Do you have a dog?" My dad's allergic to pet fur or something. What are you doing? Homework? Oh yeah, spelling is hard. Really, really hard. What took you so long to get home? Do you walk or ride the bus? Like the bus. You want to play something? I have lots of dolls. You want to come over and play? I have lots of games we could play. For someone with so many questions, however, there was one that she refused to answer herself, which made Ivana even more suspicious. One afternoon, while unpacking the necessary supplies to complete her homework, Marissa asked her what she did at school and continued to pry about details. Swallowing hard to push back the apprehensiveness, she turned and asked, "Where do you go to school, Marissa? I never see you at mine." The girl in the window looked as if she were suddenly put on a stage with a spotlight on her face. "I used to go to a private school by Mom's house, but Daddy's been homeschooling me, or something." "Really? Is it fun staying home?" "Sure, I guess." She tilted her head as if listening, then her eyes widened in surprise. "Nothing. My daddy's calling. See you later." At dinner, she brought up Marissa. She told them everything about her, all the questions and the weird feelings she got. She admitted how she had been actively avoiding her and sneaking around so she wouldn't see her. At first, her parents didn't seem to worry, saying that their new neighbor was just a little nosy. Thomas seemed more interested, and she could tell by his face that he was more curious than anything else. After dinner, he asked if he could see Marissa, and there wasn't any reason she had to answer no. But when he tried to get her attention, they found that that night she didn't come to the window. Thomas made sure the window was locked before going back to his own room. A week passed, and they waited for the strange neighbor friend. A week passed, and Marissa was nowhere in sight, and neither of them had any desire to go knocking on the door with Douglas inside. Maybe she's imaginary. I'm too big for imaginary friends. Finally, on a particular cold evening, she saw the flicker from the window once again. Was indeed open, but only enough for Marissa to whisper through. She looked all right, albeit a bit tired. "Hey, Ivana, you want to see something cool?" "What is it?" "I made a pillow fort. It's really fun. It's got multiple little rooms. If you're sneaky, you could come over and we can play in it." "Why do I have to be sneaky?" "Daddy doesn't like people coming over. They make messes. You won't, but he thinks you will." "Where is the pillow fort?" "It's in the little crawl space under the living room floor." "You wanna?" Ivana swallowed hard. "It's late, and I have school tomorrow. I gotta go to bed. I'm sorry." "It's okay. I just never have any friends over. It's like they forgot about me." "Oh, I bet they didn't. Everyone's in school, and I'll ask my mom tomorrow." Marissa cracked a little smile, and for a while they sat in silence. "Is Douglas your dad?" Ivana asked slowly, as if she were tiptoeing around. The little girl in the window made a face she hadn't before. Her brow furrowed, and she shook her head. "Yeah, he and my dad only talked a little. He doesn't seem to like neighbors much." "That's not my daddy's name." Thomas wouldn't let such new information go, and spent more time trying to encounter Marissa himself. He asked questions like, "Does she look like him?" Or what else did she say about him? Still, there was no response whenever Thomas was present. Even if he hid so, she couldn't see him. This frustrated him greatly, and he continued to bring it up to their parents, only to be told not to spy on neighbors. At one point, he accused his sister of making it all up because she was upset about Alyssa. Morning proved she wasn't making anything up. It was 4:30 before the sun had begun to rise up in the gray winter sky. The entire family was awoken by the sound of glass shattering. She was the first to get up and figure out what had caused the noise, since all she had to do was peek out the window. The window Marissa had so frequently perched in and had shattered outward, scattering shimmering shards of glass all over the weeds in the window well below. There, the dark-haired girl stood, her curly locks no longer in braids, and her eyes wide with fear, or at least that's what she perceived to be fear. She was shaking her head, and when Ivana called her name, she looked around frantically, her eyes unfocused. I can't. I can't see. It's too dark. I don't want to be here, please. Marissa, I'm right here. What's happened? She waved her arms, but the girl only groped around blindly. I don't want to go back into the dark place. It's not fun. It's not fun. There was another distinct thud, and then her voice was gone. Everyone rushed in shortly after, but nobody could figure out what had happened or what she was even talking about when she tried to articulate what she had seen. That afternoon, Ivana decided to call Alyssa out in hopes of telling someone who would better understand. She sat on her windowsill, looking out as she listened to the ringing in anticipation. Alyssa's mother answered after 3 attempts, sounding irritated before giving over the phone. Hey, Ivana, how are you? Something weird is happening in your house. She went into detail explaining what was happening from the first night to that morning, and her old friend only listened in a nervous silence. It was only after Ivana mentioned Marissa's offer to join her in the crawl space pillow fort that Alyssa spoke up. Wait, she said she was playing in the crawl space? Mm-hmm. She wanted me to go see it. It was under the living room. You've been to my house, though. We have a basement just like yours. No crawl space. Really? Oh, yeah. It was then, while absent-mindedly staring at the window, she noticed Douglas running from his house, hastily tossing ratty bags into the back of his red truck. He was staring all around as if afraid someone would sneak up on him, then jumped in and drove away. She went hopping down the stairs, eager to tell Thomas, only to find her father sitting in the couch, leaning forward to focus all attention on the news report. Hey, honey, isn't that... Her mother came running in, and they all stared in horror as the breaking news ribbon moved across the screen and a photo of a man with thick white mustache and silver blonde hair was put on screen. The local reporter spoke with a grim urgency. Police are searching for 55-year-old Douglas Hume, who is the primary suspect in the murder of Sandra and Anthony Mitchell, as well as the abduction of their 7-year-old daughter. After neighbors reported a foul smell coming from the attached duplex where Hume had previously lived, police found the Mitchells' remains buried in the crawl space after having been missing for nearly 4 months. Police believe that Hume is tied to multiple robberies and abductions all over the state. He is considered to be armed and very dangerous. If you have any information concerning the whereabouts of Mr. Hume, please call this number on screen. Ivana watched in shock as her mother snatched the phone from her hands and darted into the kitchen to dial the number. The end.
Oh, damn.
I didn't realize it was so long. Sorry, guys.
Okay. You could do those too. That was good.
Yeah.
You gave it a gravitas. A gravitas.
Gravitas.
Yes, a creepy ghost story.
Indeed.
Dead all along. I love these. It's creepy. They give me shivers, don't they?
These are good. They're shiver-inducing.
I got chills. They're multiplying. Oh, God.
I got goosebumps on my goosebumps, man.
Have you got another one, Baines? I've got one.
I do. I found a couple more.
Oh,
yeah.
cool. All right.
So, this happened about 12 years ago. My family owns a farm.
Tell us the title. Sorry.
I'll tell you the title after I'm done.
Okay.
The title's a spoiler. So, this happened about 12 years ago. My family owns a farm in the heart of an Indian reservation. One winter, I was home for Christmas, taking care of the farm while my parents were away Christmas shopping. As I was home by myself, way late in the night, and I hear all our cows freaking out. I knew it had to be the wild dogs that are rampant in the area. So I throw on some boots, grab a shotgun, load it up, and head out to the field. This was a perfect scenario for a horror movie. It was cloudy, but there was a full moon, and it was breaking through the clouds just right to light up all the snow. I ran out into the middle of the field, and just in time I see two dogs. They were standing up facing each other and fighting. I think, perfect, 2 for 1. So I pump a shell into the chamber of my 12 gauge, and then it happened. The two dogs heard the rack. They both stopped, looked over at me, and ran away on their back legs. Immediately I froze, and every ghost story about skinwalkers and all the other native legends I grew up with flew through my mind. Keep in mind that I'm a white guy, and up until then, these were all just boogeyman stories the native kids like to tell us to scare us. That night, they became real to me. So that's a series of stories called Skinwalker stories.
Oh,
It's just
that's
like Native American legends of these shape-shifting, part animal, part
I
human.
love those stories, man.
Love those too, yeah. The title is They Ran Away on Their Back Legs. It's the title.
Oh, cool,
I
man.
don't have an author here, it doesn't say.
Okay.
Man, one of my favorite stories of those, I don't even remember what it's called. I think Lazy Masquerade read it once. And I mean, he's read a bunch of Skinwalker stories, so.
Yeah, that's where I heard of them, was through him, yeah.
Yeah, and I just love the way that some of the stories, they describe these skinwalkers. There was one in particular that I loved. Like I said, I don't remember the name, but like there's these guys and they go camping, of course, and they get split up somehow. And long story short, one of the guys hears his friend calling him, and of course, with all the Skinwalker stories, he goes to see it and finds that it isn't his friend. But just the way these things are described when they see them, like they look like certain people, but there's just something off, like something almost vacant, And like, I love the way it leaves your mind to fill in what that kind of vacant look is. And it makes it terrifying for some reason. Like just, I love it. It's cool.
Yeah, it's
stuff,
always
man.
described like you think you're seeing someone you know. It could be your friend or whatever, or your neighbor, but you look at them and it's like someone's wearing a costume.
Yeah.
The person you know or something. And it's kind of like they don't know how to behave.
Like
Yeah.
It's very creepy.
See,
Exactly.
Absolutely. Like they talk in almost like they're recordings, like they're repeating things that they don't actually really know what it means.
Yeah.
And like one of the stories had ended once in a way that I really liked, that the Skinwalker had been saying, help me, and stuff like that, to kind of draw you in. But in reality, the Skinwalker didn't know what it was saying. That was just the last thing that its last victim said.
Yeah, it's just repeating the last thing. Oh, it's very creepy.
I love it, yeah.
I work at a house that's kind of like out in the woods somewhat. I mean, it's close to town, but there's a lot of sort of bushland around. And these Skinwalker stories, I think of them every time I'm walking to my car. Like, I'm like,
oh, really?
What if I hear like a friend of mine or something like in the woods or someone like, it crosses my mind every time I'm walking to my car with all these woodlands around.
Yeah, man. I bet you got like 10 within like a mile of you.
10 Skinwalkers? Probably.
Oh god.
But you're
scary.
You're a foreskin walker.
Oh my god, that could be a great Jewish legend because they made
there you go.
the golem out of the clay. And...
Something has to become of all that extra material.
It's a skin golem. No. Those creepy rabbis. Oh, I love it. Oh, that will be your next creepypasta, Baines. You got to write that for Reddit.
There you go.
All right. Okay, mine up now. I'll go with you, and I'll not mention the title until the end. So leaves a bit of suspense because the titles can give a bit of foreshadowing or set a tone, or they can be a spoilers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It depends. All right. So my story. After waking up with a jolt, the girl laid in bed for a few seconds longer, reaching over to switch on her bedside lamp. She tried to remember exactly what had stolen her sweet slumber away. When she couldn't, the brunette swung her legs over the bed and heaved herself up, checking the time on her phone. She snorted when she saw it was midnight, the witching hour. Knowing that sleep would only evade her, she left her bedroom for the kitchen, a good cup of coffee on her mind. She passed by her front door. A chill spread like liquid fire down her spine. It's only winter, she told herself, focusing again on the coffee plan. Measuring out scoops of water and preparing her cup kept her occupied. But as the dark liquid boiled, she had nothing left to keep her mind from wandering off. The chill returned, and she couldn't help but glance behind her to the front door. It stood there innocently enough, just like always, the deadbolt still in place. She could see nothing amiss with it. Turning back to her coffee, she did her best to forget the feeling. With her cup in hand, she started back towards her bedroom. As she walked by the front door, she decided that a quick glance outside the peephole would calm her restless mind. The chill worsened with each step she took towards the door, and further away from the safety of her warm blankets. She pressed her empty hand against the cold metal door and took a deep breath before leading her eye to the peephole. At first, she could only see an inky blackness, and somehow seemed to swirl in itself. When she blinked in surprise, the void melted away. She wished it hadn't. In its place there stood what she could only guess was once a man. The limbs were long and inhumanly awkward, the bulky joints branching off into several arms. Not unlike the branches of a tree, the creature was draped in a black suit, somehow making the thing more nightmarish to her. The icing on the proverbial cake, however, was what passed as the hellish thing's face. It was as though her mind blurred the ghastly visage to spare itself further shock and horror. She moved herself away from the door, her hand still pressed against it. The scalding mug of coffee fell, liquid burning her bare legs. As she fell backwards and tried to crawl away from the door, she knew somehow that her mind hadn't been playing tricks on her. As she crab-walked away from the door, she watched the tendrils of black as the void snaked through the cracks. The girl was trapped between the instinct to flee and the gut feeling to not turn her back on the door. When the door jolted, the urge to flee overcame her, and she slipped in the burning liquid as she tried to make her way back to her room. She knew deep down she was trapping herself in a corner, but she had to get away from the door. The girl was halfway down the hallway when she heard the previously locked door creak open. She screamed and slipped into a wall, cracking her chin and stunning her. After that, there was only blackness. "Nicole?" A warm male voice snapped the woman out of her trance. She turned around. She was met by one of her sister's doctors. She nodded, not sure if she should say anything or even if she could find her voice. If she did have something to say. That morning, she had gotten an urgent phone call from the hospital saying that her sister Lindsay was there. Before they had even let her see, the doctor had pulled her off to the side and insisted that they talk about what might have happened. Phrases like self-inflicted and assault had been thrown around, and Nicole felt her mind reel. She still hadn't fully understood what they had been saying until she saw Lindsay with her own eyes. Her little sister had a bandage wrapped around her head, covering both of her ears as well as her eyes. They said it was to keep her now deadened eyes from drying out, and to try and keep the infection out of the wound. Lindsay had made her to tears. The doctors had guessed that either she or someone had jammed a pencil into them to keep her off balance or to deafen her against something. There was a mix of first and second degree burns on her hands and legs and feet from what was assumed to be coffee her neighbours had found slipped all over the entry of her apartment. As Nicole walked into her sister's hospital room for the first time, she thought she had spied a silhouette of a man in the window that she knew was impossible. Her sister's room was on the 3rd story of the hospital. So there we are. Clumsy Slender Man story.
Yeah.
That's the thing about is when we read these live like this, like a lot of them will have little typos or things in the sentences that get left out, and you kind of trip, or sometimes that sometimes that's not even the excuse. Sometimes you just kind of trip over your own tongue, but
yeah,
I think we're all doing a good job so far.
The change in pace can be a bit hard to take in some of them. I think this one actually changed perspective to the girl's sister in the second part, and it doesn't give you any clue to that.
Oh, that's what happened.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's quite a stun. Yeah, if I'd have read it through before, I would have known that. But anyway, that is a Slender Man story. So
okay, so we got a little necessary Slendy in there. We're not a reasonable creepypasta webcast unless we get Slendy in there. So, all right. Well, I've got one here that I haven't read it through yet, but it's got some pretty good acclaim on this site. So, just hoping.
I'll just quickly before you go. That reminds me. I heard a story. I don't know who read it, but it's one of the ones on YouTube, and it's this girl. They were having some kind of Halloween event, and she had made a Slender Man, like almost a body pillow kind of thing, but she made Slender Man. And so when they went into their tents, she just brought Slender Man in with her and used it as a pillow, basically. So they're doing some kind of event, some kind of outdoor Halloween thing, I think it was, or something. And so she brings it into the tent, and they're sleeping. And in the middle of the night, someone creeps up to their campground and undoes her tent and goes in. It was a vagrant or something like that, or a drug addict or something like that, going to look for something. So the guy creeps into her tent, and he sees Slenderman, and he starts screaming monsters! Monsters! Everybody wakes up. Yeah.
Saved by Slenderman.
Saved by Slendy.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, we've got time for one more.
All right.
Okay, Okay. This was by Liam Vickers, and it is called... I think I give the because it's pretty... Colorado Fishing Trip.
Okay, what was it called?
Okay.
Colorado...
Fishing Trip.
Fishing Trip, okay.
Our trip started in late February as my 3 friends, John, Steve, Max, and I drove deep into the backwoods of Boxwood Gulch to follow the fork of the South Platte River. Steve owned a cabin up in the country, so we left my truck there and began our 57-mile hike into the wooded terrain following the river. We had all of our camping and fishing gear packed, and enough food to hopefully last us a 3-day journey both ways. The pre-spawn base bass wouldn't be an easy catch once we reached the hole. But if we were going to endure this brutal cold, we wouldn't go home without a fight. As we first set out in the early morning, a few light snowflakes began to fall. The terrain was heavily wooded and uneven, making for slow going. But the cool mountain air rustled through the trees and sunlight streamed through the canopy, making the snowflakes glint and shimmer as birds chirped overhead. It was going to be a near-perfect trip. We stopped for a quick rest a few hours in. The weather had been slowly worsening since we had left, but it was only then that we realized how bad it had really gotten. The snow was whipping around us in a blinding flurry as the wind howled. The crooked, mangled trees creaked and swayed violently, threatening to snap in two. The ground had already acclimated a good 6 inches of snow. It was about midday, but the sky was black. And I don't mean dark due to the ever-intensifying storm. I mean that in between the gaps of the clouds, there was no blue, solid black. None of us really made a note of it at the time, as it was hard to notice through the thick cascade of snow and the limited visibility. After continuing our hike for some time, however, it became all too apparent that something was wrong. In addition to the sky, we also realized that there was nothing in the distance. There should have been some mountains or something like that there had been at the start. But no matter which way we turned, the world only seemed to extend 50 or so feet around us. Then it disappeared into the blizzard. It was nighttime now. It was nighttime now, or at least it was dark out. My watch, however, read 2 o'clock in the afternoon. As we walked forward, new things slowly came into view, but everything behind us disappeared. And although we could progress further, we couldn't seem to double back. Once we left something behind us, we couldn't reach it again. Steve had forgotten his lighter a little while back when we stopped to eat, but when we tried to turn around and go back, we were greeted by a wall of snow and fog, impossible to see through. Our flashlights' beams didn't penetrate the fog. They stopped as they hit it, as if it was a physical wall. Tendrils of vapor danced across the indistinct surface, and the gray void behind it seemed to extend into an eternity. Curious, Steve slowly reached out and moved his hand into the fog. First his fingertips disappeared, and then his whole hand vanished into the haze. We all stood in disbelief, looking at the wall, which was impossibly tall and extended as far as we could see. There was no real gradient to it. Things didn't fade into the distance. There was a clear line where the wall began, and nothing was visible beyond that point. We were making a note of all this when Steve muttered something. "What was that?" I asked. He stammered. "I can't feel my hand." He said this slowly, as if realizing it as he said it. Puzzled, he retracted his hand slowly and then screamed. His glove was shredded, almost disintegrated, and his hand looked like it had been forced through a wood chipper. Deep gashes revealed white bone underneath, and what fingers were left were stripped clean. We all panicked. Oh God, this is bad," Max cried. Steve simply stood clutching what was left of his hand and hyperventilating. We had to get him to a hospital, or he would certainly bleed to death, but we were almost a day's walk from Steve's cabin, which was already remote enough. We were all frantically checking our phones for a signal when the worst happened. Steve fainted. His eyes closed, his legs buckled, and he fell forward into the fog. None of us noticed at first, but when we finally did, all we could see were his legs protruding from the mist. We immediately, without thinking, rushed to pull him out. We grabbed his legs and strained to drag him back into the view. But before we even saw him, however, we immediately regretted doing so. We somehow knew what we would find. The thing we dragged out was not Steve. Not anymore. All of his skin was cleaved off, his rib cage ripped open with his entrails spilling out, and his face instantly burned into my vision, becoming an afterimage that haunts me to this day. Not merely because it was horrendously mutilated, not merely because his eyes had been torn out, leaving only empty sockets, but because it smiled at me. A big, wide smile that started small, but the gashes in his face allowed it to literally stretch from ear to ear. Max screamed and shoved Steve's mangled body back into the fog. Don't mean to laugh.
This is a short comedy piece for Pit Face.
Max screamed and shoved Steve's mangled body back into the fog. We ran as fast as we could, the only way we could, deeper into the woods. Just as before, the snow and fog parted before us, but swallowed up everything we left behind. As we ran and ran, the scenery around us began to slowly change. The trees surrounding us were now withered and dead. The grass was flattened and bleached white. In fact, everything around us was lifeless and dull. Colors had all but disappeared, leaving only shades of gray and an intensified feeling of loneliness and death. Guys, I shouted while I ran, not daring to stop for even a minute. We can't turn around and go straight back, but maybe we can circle around back to Steve's cabin. Then we could get the truck and get the hell out of here. John and Max nodded their heads, and we both turned 90 degrees right and continued running. Eventually, we ran through what appeared to be a herd of deer. Were laying on the ground, gray and lifeless, hacked to pieces. Blood soaked the snow-covered ground. As we ran through the herd, dodging corpses, it was hard not to notice their dead, lifeless eyes seemed to follow us. When we felt confident enough that we wouldn't be doubling back on ourselves, we turned towards Steve's cabin, towards safety. We ran for at least another hour. Eventually, however, none of us could run any longer. Our bodies simply wouldn't allow it, and we were forced to stop. After some time, Max and John and I managed to get a fire going despite the snow and damp tinder. We had hoped that it would bring some sense of warmth and security, but we were wrong. The flames were a bright orange hue, bleeding some color into the grayscale world. It clearly did not belong, nor did we. The longer the flames crackled and popped, the more we began to hear something. Distant and quiet at first, but slowly growing closer, louder, and more numerous. A chorus of blood-curdling wails and moans filled the stagnant air around us. Focused on the fire and pretending to be safe, mesmerized by its beauty, we didn't immediately notice a mangled deer carcass slowly dragging itself out of the fog and into view. Nor did we notice the second, nor the third. Finally, we snapped out of our trance just in time to scramble to our feet in terror as a myriad of different animal carcasses clambered out of the fog, drawn out to the strange light of the fire. We were intruders in their world. I was paralyzed by fear, unable to breathe. The corpses moved with a surreal and broken haphazard toss of limbs, as if poorly animated puppets. I turned to my friends to find that they were no longer beside me. They had taken off running, leaving me behind. I turned around to run after them, but something grabbed me by my shoulder. I didn't need to turn around to know what it was. I could tell by the hand gripping my shoulder, a hand that looked as though it had gone through a wood chipper. I flailed and managed to free myself before I could get a good grip on me and took off running. I didn't look back. No way did I want to see that face of what was once my friend. I could no longer see John or Max, and I assumed that they must have been ahead of me. But I was the one with the keys to the truck, and Steve had the keys to the cabin. They wouldn't be any safer if I couldn't meet up with them, so I ran and ran faster and for longer than any human could possibly do under normal circumstances. Finally, after God knows how long, I could faintly make out a structure in the distance. It was the cabin. I felt a twinge of hope. The wails continued to ring out in the night air, but it seemed to have a lead on me at the time. I reached the truck, unlocked it, and jumped inside. I scanned the area for Max or John, but could see neither. I couldn't just leave them, but I couldn't wait forever either. I sat sweating and shaking nervously as the wails grew closer and louder. I had just about made up my mind to leave when I could suddenly make out someone sprinting towards me. It looked like Max. I started up the truck and motioned for him to run faster, but for some reason, I found myself subconsciously pressing the switch to my left, locking all the doors. My instinct told me that something was wrong. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking like crazy. I looked back up, and Max's horribly mutilated face was pressed up against the driver's window, staring at me, smiling. He was trying to open the door. I slammed my foot on the gas and drove off, shaking like a madman and holding back the vomit. As I drove home, the sky slowly brightened back up in a blue hue, and I could eventually see the sun breaking through the clouds. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. I began to see other cars on the road, and the people inside waved at me as I waved at them. Nice, normal people. I went straight home and asked my girlfriend to marry me. I'm sorry, that's just not true. I'm sitting in my house now, door locked and barricaded, windows boarded up, and I'm writing this story. And I felt happy for the first time in a long time writing that ending. I hardly even remember what a blue sky looks like, but I just wanted to picture it in my mind one last time. I just needed to imagine a happier world because in reality, that's not how it ended. The truth is, as I drove, the sky did not brighten up, the sun did not reappear, and the fog still surrounded me as it now surrounds my house. I hear wailing all around and knocks at my door constantly, and when I look through the peephole, all I ever see is something smiling at me. The stench of death is everywhere. The phone doesn't work. The TV and the radio broadcast nothing but static. I hear the locks on my door being undone at night, and I must constantly keep watch and relock them. I'm simply waiting for the night they get into my house, and when I forget to check the door, or when they break through the window, or when I wake up in the middle of the night to see them next to me, their smiles inches away from my face. The end.
Awesome. I think that was a bit of a cross between Stephen King, The Langoliers or The Fog, and Arthur Machen.
Right.
Yeah.
Like the mist.
For sure, man.
Lovely.
For show.
That was very scary,
For
that one,
show.
especially when the guy withdrew his hand from the fog.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
God.
like when they pushed him back in the fog. I don't know why that made me laugh so hard. Steve's like, guys, I just need help. They just shove him back in.
Oh, God.
Not smiling at me.
That was lovely. The perfect end. We've just gone over an hour there. Fantastic bunch of creepy, scary stories. Almost as creepy as the blackness that actually represents Baines. We're talking on video here. I can see Pitface. You can see me. Baines presumably can see me if he has eyes in his eye sockets. I'm not sure if he has, but all we can see is blackness.
The fog got him.
Yeah, I don't think he
He's
has.
like the Steve of our group.
Yeah.
Right.
He's just.
Oh God, Baines!
There's this blackness at the moment. There's going to be like some kind of grin just flashing through that darkness there. Bloody eye hole.
Yeah, dude, do you just have all the lights off at your house? Why has it been like, it hasn't even been black, it's like gray.
I just got my camera covered up, CIA protection. I just didn't take the paper off.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm all sick and grody.
He's protecting us from the horror. That is
Exactly.
left.
He's a man.
It's for your
He's a
safety.
dirty guy. He's a dirty little guy.
Oh, God. Now I'm picturing something completely different. It's creepy, but, in a very different way.
It's a different way. Yeah.
God, don't you wear anything underneath
I like
that
to
dressing
help.
gown, Baines? I mean, do it up, for Christ's sake, man. Oh. Well, this has been the Creepypasta cast. I think that was interesting. Maybe we should do this for Halloween or something like that.
That was a neat idea. Yeah, totally.
This is
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
This is really,
Interesting.
maybe we'll write our own next time. I'm pretty sure I could do a better job than some of these guys. I'm pretty sure.
If it doesn't take you 50 years to do it.
Yeah. Well, there's that.
Oh!
I'll just end it. And say I was dead all along or something. That seems to be one of the... It was a ghost. I love those. All right, so this has been Quackcast 315. I've been Creepy Ozone, and You've been Creepy Pit and Creepy...
We've been all the people. We're still here. We're still the same people we started out with.
Are we? Or are we just skinwalkers?
We're not skinwalkers. Don't worry.
4 skinwalkers. There's only 3 of us.
You know, it's people are imposters or skinwalkers, and when you hear their song. So unless you hear that, you'll be okay.
What's this?
And their song is dun 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 dun.
Goodbye, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye.